Tepe is an unfortunate orphan whose parents went on vacation with the Attack on Titan cast, leaving him broken alone. However, his story changes when he gets adopted by his grandfather, who makes him a billionaire overnight and pimps in 4 wives. One day while training, Tepe gets summoned to make himself useful in the kitchen. On his way, he gets intercepted by his father, who says he has to put in more work to his training if he wants to succeed him. Tepe responds and says he's got better things to do with his life. His father then asks if being a manho is on his bucket list and gets whacked in the face by Tepe's mom. Enraged by their conversation, she asks if any of them has a fully developed brain and leaves. Shortly after, while they eat, the news talks about attacks on the elites, and Tepe says they've got nothing to worry about. His father then asks what he'd do if he were an elite. In response, Tepe says he'll figure something out, while his mom sighs knowing she hatched the wrong egg. Suddenly, Tepe realizes he's late for school and hurriedly gets his motorbike, but his mom reminds him bikes are not allowed in school. However, he leaves on his bicycle instead, while his mom accuses his dad of shooting a dummy bun in her oven. He turns to take a final look at them and never sees them again. Sometime later, Tepe visits his parents' headstone at the cemetery and tells them he's about to be adopted by his grandfather. While thinking about his life, he spots Charlotte on a horse carriage racing down the road and a bunch of dimwits going after them. Just then, he remembers the news and his father's question, so he gets on his bike and joins the chase. Meanwhile, the hooligans catch up with the carriage and break open the door. Just in time, Tepe catches up and introduces himself to Charlotte. After this, he gets attacked by the hooligans but manages to get in their car. However, he soon realizes he isn't Tom Cruise. While the hooligans shoot at the carriage, Tepe tries to break free but gets a gun in his face. Suddenly, Alfred leaves the carriage on autopilot and channels his inner Bruce Wayne. Just then, the carriage loses one of its wheels, so Tepe pulls a Dominic Toretto to save Charlotte. However, they both get flung into the jungle. After this, the last standing hooligan points his gun at Alfred and instantly regrets his actions. In the jungle, Tepe awakes wondering how he survived the fall. He then mistakenly places his hand on Charlotte's massive airbags and thanks them for saving him from the fall. Charlotte suddenly wakes up but finds Tepe standing miles away from her. She then pretends to have lost her memory, shocking Tepe. Afterward, she tells him she's just messing with him and introduces herself, saying she's a princess. She then asks Tepe to help her up. After he obliges, he says he's not used to being around pretty girls, so Charlotte asks if he's used to squeezing their balloons while they sleep. Shocked to hear that, Tepe says it was an accident. Charlotte then asks if all boys like girls with massive racks. In response, Tepe says he could only speak for himself. Shortly after, they walk down the road and find Alfred waiting beside a car, so Charlotte thanks Tepe with a kiss and runs off. Later that evening, Tepe arrives at his grandfather's residence but gets delayed by the guards. After this, Eshin, his grandfather, arrives to bail him out while he apologizes for showing up late. Shortly after this, Tepe asks if it's true that his parents were murdered. In response, Eshin asks Tepe what he'd do if he found the culprit, and he says he'd take his revenge. Eshin then tries to change his mind, but Tepe accuses him of being unmoved by his daughter's death. Unbothered, Eshin asks why he arrived late, and Tepe says he stopped to save someone. A few moments later, Eshin introduces Tepe as his son and successor on a stage while the audience laughs, wondering if his hair was styled by a tornado. Eshin then apologizes for his looks and says he got dirty while saving someone's life on his way to the event. After the audience applauds his bravery, Tepe dresses up and tells Eshin he wants revenge more than the conglomerate. In response, Eshin tells Tepe to reserve his rage, since he's got more enemies now that he's a successor. He then advises Tepe to find some allies for himself. Shortly after, Tepe fakes his laughter at boring jokes from unfamiliar faces who suck at ass-kissing. However, he gets rescued by Vincent, who then introduces him to his daughter, Maria, and tells him he's just like Eshin. After their small talk, Tepe gets flooded by an avalanche of more ass-kissers. Afterward, when Tepe sits, feeling exhausted, his personal maid, serves him a drink. He thanks her for being nice to him and spots Sylvia sword training outside. Immediately, he picks up his training sword and goes out to challenge her to a spar. Without hesitation, Sylvia tries to hack him to pieces while he struggles to keep up. Just then, their sparring gets interrupted by Vincent and Eshin. So Eshin introduces Sylvia as Vincent's eldest daughter and says they'll be getting married someday, surprising Tepe. Later that night, Tepe dozes on the ride home and rests on Yu's pleasure pillows for comfort. In a conversation with Yu, Ishin reveals that he feels remorse over changing people's environment arbitrarily. In response, Yu says sometimes people don't choose their environment, but can decide how to live in it. So Ishin decides to observe Tepe's decisions. When they arrive at their destination, Tepe wakes and apologizes to Yu for drooling all over her honker-donkers. While Tepe wonders if they are at Buckingham Palace, Ishin announces that the mansion is now his. After Ishin leaves, Yu introduces herself as Tepe's personal maid. On getting in, they were welcomed by a long line of maids who called Tepe master. Surprised by this, he asks to be addressed by his name. However, Yu refuses his request. Shortly after, Tepe was shown his room, which gave him a welcome-to-heaven impression. After Yu leaves, Tepe hops on his bed and thinks of how they experienced more in one day than some people do on a year-long dating app subscription. Suddenly, Tepe calls Yu to ask if it is normal for a fiancé to be arranged on someone's behalf. In response, she says Ishin must have considered what's best for them both. To satisfy his curiosity about Sylvia, Yu says she's a blue-blooded fencing prodigy. However, Tepe says he needs to get to know her personality, since she exuded some sad aura while they sparred. The next day, Tepe was dressed up for school and was surprised to see Yu in a different outfit. On the way to school, Tepe asks if he could ride a bike to school since he's not used to limos. Yu then says it's more likely for him to clap her cheeks than ride on a bike to school. When they arrived at the school, all eyes went full-on laser mode, making Tepe wonder if he'd accidentally walked into a beauty pageant. Yu then explains that he bears a big name now, and it's obvious from his ride. Overwhelmed by the attention, Tepe flees the scene. After his panic exit, Tepe literally bumps into Seika, the social club president, alongside her tag-along troopers. After this, Seika asks him to get an ice pack for his forehead. However, all he can see are the bright colors of her forbidden fortress. Just then, Seika's sidekick squad joins her, giving Tepe a view of the complete color spectrum. When he finally manages to snap out of it, Seika tells him to button up since no one wants a bite of his Adam's apple. After this, she checks him out, looking for God knows what. After this, she rates him an 8 out of 10, while her sidekick squad reminds her that they have nothing about him on their database. Just then, Seika asks if he is a freshman and Tepe says he's a transfer student. Suddenly, she takes her self-glorification stance and reintroduces herself, like it was supposed to ring a bell. However, Tepe was either deaf or Seika's name was as valuable as a used napkin. While her minions protested, Seika tugged on their leash, so they left. Shortly afterward, Yu is relieved to find Tepe, and he apologizes for getting lost on his first day. After this, he visited the school principal and got another round of shameless ass-kissing. When he talks about it with Yu, she says it's because Ishin donates generously to the school. Just when Tepe thinks he's going to throw up from the admiration shoved down his throat, he gets approached by Nezu, a classmate who wants to be friends, followed by an army of Ishin's beneficiaries. Strolling along the corridor, Charlotte spots Tepe and suddenly covers his eyes. When Tepe couldn't tell who it was, she pressed her fun bags against him to give him a memory juggle. When he finally recognizes her, she thanks him for saving her life and jumps on him. This made them end up in a position from 50 Shades of Grey. Unfortunately, Sylvia walks in on them and freaks out afterward. Unbothered, Charlotte offers to show Tepe around, but he's more worried that his betrothal is in shambles. Meanwhile, Seika finds out Tepe's last name and suddenly regrets being nice to him. Just then, she decides to make his life miserable. Later, Charlotte suggests that Tepe joins the social club. While they talk, he spots Sylvia and reveals she's his fiancée. Surprised to hear this, Charlotte tells him that he needs to redeem himself in some way, so she pulls him along. A few seconds later, while they watched Sylvia fencing, Charlotte calls out to Sylvia and says Tepe thinks she's ass at fencing. While he freaks out, Sylvia challenges him to a duel. After accepting her challenge, the news soon spread around the school and got to Yu. Just then, she makes a call to request Tepe's training gear. The duel begins, but Tepe loses on his first move, giving Seika and her evil minions a brief moment of happiness. However, Sylvia excuses Tepe's loss and says he could ditch the rules of fencing since he's not used to them. Just in time, Yu arrives with a new practice sword for Tepe. After this, they restart the duel and Charlotte acts as the referee. However, the duel ends in a draw, so Tepe compliments Sylvia's speed and says he'd like to get to know her better. Sylvia asks if he's doing that because they were forced down each other's throats. In response, Tepe says he'd be damned if he rejects her without sampling her merchandise first. After this, Sylvia takes his hand and Charlotte joins them in a group hug. Feeling disappointed, Seika leaves wishing Sylvia had poked Tepe full of holes in all the right places. Afterwards, Charlotte tries to grab Tepe's sword and they fall in the process with her straddling him. Sylvia suddenly screams of her disapproval, but Charlotte practices bull riding on Tepe, while he desperately tries to keep his pants dry. On their way home, after Yu answers Tepe's questions about the social club, he asks why she isn't a member, and she says she doesn't have the right kind of blood. The next day, Sylvia and Charlotte take Tepe to the social club building, while he wonders how a building could be dedicated to just one club. On entering the club building, Charlotte and Sylvia announce they'll be endorsing Tepe for membership. Tepe cringes from lots of stares, piercing through his skin, but gets relieved by Nezu, who suddenly geeks out, yapping about the club. His orientation speech was violently interrupted by Seika and her female bouncers. Looking pissed as a urinal, Seika asks what a riffraff like Tepe wants with the social club. Sylvia responds by asking if the social club needs a lecture on manners. In response, Seika accuses Sylvia of shamelessly simping for the Orima successor like her cheap friends. After this, Sylvia says it's totally normal for her to be friends with someone her father knows. Facing Tepe, Seika accuses him of making a puppet out of her club members. In response, Sylvia tells Seika that she looks desperate and pathetic. After this, Seika tells Tepe to know his place, since he's a nobody's spawn who recently got an upgrade. Pissed off, Tepe says it's none of her business, so Seika then tells him that she can't be intimidated by his weak baritone. After this, Seika says the club has an upcoming party, and he'd only be accepted if he can show proper etiquette. Just then, Tepe vows to make her waters break when the day arrives. The next few days, Tepe practices how to drink tea and walk like a proper trust fund kid. Later, while Charlotte teaches him to dance, she gives him a kiss as a reward for getting better, suddenly erecting his flagpole. Later at night, when Yu serves Tepe some tea, he says she reminds him of his mom and states that the social club distracted him from his previous goals to avenge her death. In response, Yu reminds him that the social club is his best shot at making allies as instructed by Ishin. In addition to this, she says she's glad to serve Tepe since Ishin has been good to her. The next day at school, Seika gets pissed because Tepe keeps getting better. Just then, she realizes that her butt-clenched attitude is making her look like an old witch. Meanwhile, Tepe crouches to keep his frozen sausage out of sight. However, Charlotte asks why there is a bulge in his pocket. In response, Tepe says he kept a banana from lunch. Just then, Sylvia and Yu arrive, and they resume practice. The day of the event finally arrives, so Tepe pulls up with his baddies. However, they get welcomed in a not-so-nice way by Seika and her uglies. On entering the hall, Nezu pops up out of nowhere, squirming like an overcooked spaghetti. After Seika gives her speech, Tepe goes dancing with Charlotte and nails it. Seeing this, Seika gets larger eyes and a stomach upset, drawing concerns from her comrades. Afterward, Seika tells Tepe that she's seen his improvement. However, she adds that he has to host a party to solidify his position as a bona fide member of the club. After the event, Seika tries to create some magic on her canvas but can't, since she's distracted by her run-in with Tepe. Meanwhile, at Tepe's mansion, a strange bike was delivered from Orima Industries. The engineers stated that the infallible bike was created just for Tepe. Surprised by this, he recalls his conversation with Yu and asks if the bike really doesn't fall. Tepe tries to topple the bike, but to his surprise, the bike doesn't fall. He then tells them to return the creepy bike back to wherever the hell it came from. Later at the social club building, Sylvia and Charlotte ask Tepe if he's gotten any ideas for his party. In response, Tepe says he's been to as many parties as a monk in a monastery. However, he says he's been to a few birthdays and Christmas parties. After this, he says that Seika has been out of sight for a while, insinuating that she's neglecting her duties. Immediately, he gets reminded that he's still a club member wannabe. After this, his friends tell him Seika is a top designer and model for a corporation owned by her father. Surprised, Tepe says she's cool for not getting all high and mighty because of it. He then says she'd look prettier to him if she's less dramatic. Just then, Seika arrives and says they can stop gossiping about her. After this, she calls Nezu, and he suddenly arrives, making a fool of himself for a girl out of his league. Infuriated by his testosterone shortage, Seika violates his human rights and asks Tepe if he wants some too for staring. While Tepe wonders if Seika gets high on picking on others, Nezu reveals he's been picked to participate in the presentation of a new collection from Seika's family brand. A few moments later, Nezu hangs on the wall like an artwork, while Seika tells him to stop flattering himself. She then reveals that there will be an interview about her school life after the presentation, so she has picked Nezu to attend. Suddenly, Nezu resumes his tail wagging and is sent into the wall again. On her way home, Tepe expresses his concerns about Seika's hatred for him and the Arima family. In response, Yu says he can ask Ishin for more information on that. So he tells the driver to take him to Ishin's mansion. When he arrives, Ishin asks about how he's doing. After this, Tepe asks Ishin some questions about Seika and their families. The next day at school, while Yu hands a letter to Tepe, Nezu shows up looking like a cast from Resident Evil. When Tepe asks if he's okay, Nezu says he was up all night preparing for his Aguero moment. After this, he suddenly sneezes and vibrates like an alarm clock, scaring Tepe and Yu. Later, Nezu wakes up after class and says he has to leave. Tepe then asks if he needs to be accompanied. Disoriented, Nezu spills the answers he crammed for the interview and suddenly collapses. Afterward, Tepe attends the event in Nezu's place while he revs in the school clinic. While Seika gives her speech, she spots Tepe in the crowd and freaks out. After this, they meet backstage where Tepe explains that he's representing Nezu because he can't make it. She then tells Tepe not to screw up the interview and goes for her presentation. Later in the interview, Seika controls Tepe's responses by stamping his foot repeatedly. While their foot battle continues, the interviewers ask about Seika's personality in school, and Tepe says she's an uptight control freak who reminds him of a boy's scout drill sergeant. However, he says some nice things about her afterward, surprising Seika. After this, while they had dinner together, Seika calls Tepe his comeback for almost ruining everything. After this, Tepe says he knows why Seika hates his family so much. He then reveals that Ishin's wife cheated on him with Seika's grandfather and ruined the relations between both families. Seika then says she's familiar with the story. Before she speaks further, Tepe says he heard she tried to sell some products at the Arima department stores but got rejected. Feeling pissed, Seika says she can't wait to make Ishin pay for humiliating her family like that. While she rants, Tepe pulls out a letter and hands it to her. When she opens it, Tepe reveals he's been put in charge of the stores and apologizes on Ishin's behalf. After this, he makes her an offer in exchange for her forgiveness, surprising Seika. Just then, Seika accepts the offer and demands a discount. When Tepe agrees, she tells him he still needs to throw a party to earn his club membership. The next day, Tepe tells Sylvia and Charlotte about his achievement while they remind him that he has a party to plan. Later in Seika's residence, she gets inspired and finishes working on her canvas. Sometime later, Charlotte goes to school in her horse carriage. Just then, she checks her bag and pulls out a lucky charm. However, Alfred tells her it's for easy childbirth and advises her not to get too deep into Japanese culture. Meanwhile, Yu commends Tepe for resolving the conflict between Seika's family and his. In response, Tepe says he could only do that with his grandfather's help. She then says he was right to achieve his goals using the resources at his disposal. When Tepe arrives at school with Yu, Nezu suddenly intercepts them and asks if Tepe's got plans for the upcoming holiday. In response, Tepe says he's got no plans. Nezu then thanks him for saving his butt with Seika's interview. Tepe brushes it off saying it's nothing. However, Nezu insists he must express his gratitude and almost buries his lips in Tepe's mouth. After this, he offers to help Tepe out with the party he's planning to pay him back. After this, Nezu discreetly presents an idea to Tepe. While they discuss the details of their nasty plan in whispers, Charlotte suddenly interrupts them to ask if Tepe will be free for the holidays, startling them in the process. Later in the club building, Charlotte asks if she could borrow Tepe. In response, Sylvia says she doesn't have a leash around his neck. When Charlotte asks if they're truly engaged, Sylvia says they've not made any progress on that yet. Just then she says she'll be hanging out with Tepe and asks Sylvia to be her alibi in case Alfred calls to ask. Back at Sylvia's house, Vincent asks why she isn't talking about Tepe like she usually does. Sylvia then says she doesn't talk about him all the time. However, Maria disagrees. After this, Vincent says it's good enough that she acknowledges Tepe as her fiancé, but Sylvia insists that they're just friends who share similar interests. Meanwhile, Charlotte prepares for her hangout with Tepe, while Alfred asks if she is really going to spend time with Sylvia and not Tepe. Charlotte then asks why he gets so worked up about Tepe. In response, Alfred says he's heard rumors of how close she is with Tepe. Just then, she gets a call from Sylvia, who simply asks her to say hello to Tepe for her. Later that day, Tepe joins Charlotte for their date and apologizes for showing up late. Shortly after this, they decide on where to go. When they arrived, Charlotte celebrated her freedom for the first time, and Tepe says being a princess must suck. In response, Charlotte forbids him from calling her princess. Tepe then asks how she feels safe without bodyguards. Hearing this, Charlotte says she's sure Tepe can protect her like he did when they first met. Afterward, they explored different parts of the city while having fun and trying out some street food. Later, Charlotte asks if Tepe's chefs make him foods like the one she just ate. He then says his mother used to cook his meals. Intrigued, Charlotte says she'd have loved to try out his mother's food since nothing beats a mother's cooking. Tepe then says his mother was a good cook. However, Charlotte gets carried away. A few moments later, while they ride the Ferris wheel, Charlotte compliments Tepe for speaking so nicely about his mom. Just then, Tepe reveals that he stays with his gramps because he lost his mom and dad. After this, Charlotte asks Tepe if he is going to get married to Sylvia. Shocked by her question, Tepe says he doesn't know. Charlotte then reveals that Sylvia also had lost her mom from childhood and wrote a letter to God, telling him to send her back. Tepe reveals he had always thought rich people only lived their lives having fun. However, he says it's lonelier than he ever imagined. Afterward, on their way home, Tepe suddenly gets an idea for his party and thanks Charlotte for bringing him out. Suddenly, Charlotte runs towards him and grabs him from behind. When he asks if she is trying to massage him with her balloons, Charlotte asks him to promise to always keep her in mind. This made Tepe ask if she was planning to unsubscribe from life. After his hangout with Charlotte, Tepe shares his party idea with his friends and they are all intrigued about it. After this, the club members meet at the train station. Tepe then introduces himself as the host of the party and announces that it's a mini vacation where they'll get to stay overnight at a hot spring resort. After this, Sylvia raises her hand and asks why it had to be a hot spring resort. Tepe then says the party has to be an extraordinary one. Afterward, Tepe discovers most of the club members don't know how to use their tickets. Suddenly, Seika steps up and goes through the ticket check feeling like a superstar, while the others cheered her on. Later on the train, Sylvia asks why Charlotte looks so composed, and she reveals she travels often by train in her country. Tepe then states commoners don't get to ride the train over there. Sylvia then adds that she must be talking about the Royal Continental Express. Nezu suddenly joins the conversation and says the ticket prices must be astronomical. After a while, they arrive at the resort and check out the rooms and facilities. While Tepe directs the guys to their rooms, Yu follows him like a human shadow. Tepe then asks why she's following him since they've been shown the ladies' rooms. In response, Yu says she can't stay in the same room as the other because she's a maid. Tepe then says it's not important, since his party was all about having fun and making friends. He then ends the discussion by asking if she'd like to be stuck in the same room with the boys. A few moments later, the male club members commend Tepe for bringing them on a vacation for the first time in their lives. Afterward, they cook up some plans to infiltrate the ladies' hot spring, based on Nezu's secret ideas in the class. After this, Tepe and his band of cultured dimwits play out their plans and share the spoils in advance. Meanwhile, the girls make plans to clobber Tepe and the other guys to death if they try anything stupid. Just then, they notice Yu is in love with the room corners, so they ask her to join them. Shortly after, when the girls head out to the hot spring, Seika asks if Sylvia is really going with her sword, and Sylvia responds, saying she's got a raging bloodthirst. While they undress, Sylvia tells Yu to relax, since they were all equals at the party, while Seika won't stop bugging Sylvia about her sword. Later, while the girls enjoy their bath at the hot spring, Seika realizes melons are much different from oranges. While the Team Oranges felt like the creator was unfair to them, Team Melons tried to jumpstart their deflated self-esteem. Meanwhile, the boys decide to ignore the hot spring and enjoy the sounds of the ladies bathing from the other side. Driven crazy by what they heard, one of the boys goes mad and crosses over to the ladies' side of the bath. However, he was sent back in a body bag while his comrades gave their last respects. On the other side, Sylvia was grateful to have brought her sword. However, the other boys activate Plan B and crawl around the bath. Unfortunately, Nezu and the other guy fall through a hole in the ground, leaving Tepe to complete the mission alone. Shortly after this, Tepe steps on a mine that sends him flying into the ladies' bath. After the epic failure, the girls had the boys on their knees and scolded them for acting like boys. Yu then tells Teppei that she could have told him about the traps if he had asked her, surprising the other girls. Seika then decides the boys will remain on their knees till the next day. However, Sylvia says that's going to ruin the purpose of the party. So the girls challenge the boys to a tennis game and promise to forgive them if they win. The match begins with Teppei playing against Sylvia. Teppei then distracts Sylvia to win the first round. In retaliation, Sylvia rolls out her chest cannons while the boys battle their flagpoles. Later that night, while the girls chat into the night, Seika says she'll announce that Teppei has been accepted into the club. After this, the girls talk about how amazing Teppei is and agree they like him. Just then, they make a pact never to get jealous if Teppei ever falls in love with any of them. Back at Teppei's mansion, the engineers from Arima Industries bring another bike and say they've made adjustments to the previous one to make it less disgusting. However, Teppei says he won't be caught dead riding the monster. Later at school, Teppei spots Charlotte walking ahead and creeps behind her to cover her eyes with his palms. Charlotte immediately guessed who it was correctly and said she couldn't be wrong about her destined person. Sylvia, who had been eavesdropping, then remembers their hot springs pact, so she leaves feeling sad. Suddenly, Alfred does his Bruce Wayne thing and accuses Teppei of trying to get a bite of Charlotte's dangling apples. Just then, Charlotte declares that she likes Teppei. Hearing this, Alfred freaks out, saying he'd die before he allows it. So he rushed towards them, and they ran from him. While he chases them, Alfred says he'd crush Teppei's berries if he ever lays a finger on Charlotte. When they got away, Teppei asked Charlotte what she'd like to do next, and she said she twisted an ankle while they ran. So Teppei swept her up and said they were headed to the infirmary. After he apologizes for causing her trouble, Charlotte says he can make it up to her by taking her to eat at Arima Hills. At the infirmary, they noticed some petals dropping outside and went to check it out. Just then, the students spot a nutjob jump off an airship using a parachute. Hartman suddenly makes his grand entrance and thanks the students for welcoming him. However, Seika didn't hesitate to burst his overly inflated bubble. Just then, Sylvie identifies him as a business tycoon from Charlotte's country. Hartman suddenly gives Charlotte a courtly bow, while the other girls talk about his involvement with the top dogs of the business world. While Teppei stares like a rain-drenched puppy, Hartman introduces himself as Charlotte's fiancé, surprising everyone. Afterward, Hartman reveals he'll be around for a while and takes his leave. Sylvia then asks why Charlotte kept her engagement secret. In response, Charlotte says she doesn't want to talk about it. After Sylvia leaves, Teppei reminds Charlotte they've got a date and promises to make some amazing dishes for her. Excited, Charlotte asks when this will be and Teppei says he'll give her a call. Later that day, Sylvia and Maria overhear Vincent arguing over the phone with someone. The next day at school, Charlotte goes to the club building and finds Sylvia all by herself. Sylvia then asks if Charlotte's got something to tell her. In response, Charlotte says she's sorry for not telling Sylvia about Hartman. Sylvia then retorts and says she doesn't give a rat's ass about her fiancé. She then asks if Charlotte is aware that a nuclear weapon is being built on the borders of their countries. Surprised, Charlotte says she isn't sure her father knows about it either. Sylvia then says Vincent thinks a third country might be responsible for breaking the relationship between their countries. After this, they catch Seika eavesdropping, so she steps out and admits to having heard their conversation. She then says her grandfather also said something was about to happen at Arima Hills at night. Later, Teppei heads to Arima Hills to make a reservation for his dinner with Charlotte. Just then, Hartman walks in with Josephine, his assistant, and exchanges pleasantries with Teppei. After this, Hartman meets with Ishin and Vincent, and they discuss the relations between the countries and the Arima group, considering the recent developments. Hartman apologizes for the atrocity committed on his side of the border and vows to get the culprits. Meanwhile, Charlotte sneaks out to go to Arima Hills while Alfred runs after her like a desperate detective. When Sylvie gets home, she asks Maria about Vincent's whereabouts and is told he left for Arima Hills. Maria then adds that Vincent says Sylvia could visit Teppei. Charlotte arrives late at Arima Hills but doesn't find Teppei in the suite. Meanwhile, Teppei is out practicing when Yu informs him that he has a call. On checking his phone, he finds several missed calls from Charlotte. When he calls her back, the lights at Arima Hills suddenly go off and he gets a text saying his parents were kidnapped and his lover is about to join them. After the blackout, the security men check to see what went wrong. Suddenly, they get taken out by some assassins. The assassins take the others hostage and move to Eshin's suite. When they break in, Josephine walks in with them, surprising Hartman. Just then, Ishin subtly places a call to Yu. Josephine then reveals why she tells Hartman to be wary of those around him. After this, Ishin tells Yu that they've been captured. Hearing this, Josephine asks her minions to shut him up. However, Ishin says he's just an old man who wants his peace. Meanwhile, Yu confirms that only Arima Hills was hit by the attack and has been isolated from the outside world. However, Tepe was more concerned about why Charlotte was involved. At Arima Hills, the assassins tell Charlotte to keep her shut, since they have no intention to harm her, as long as she doesn't give them trouble. However, one of the assassins couldn't stop yapping at how huge her melons were. So when he is ordered to tie Charlotte up, he says bondage is not really his thing. After they tie Charlotte up, she asks why they attacked the building, and one of them says the Arima group has earned itself lots of enemies. After this, they listen to the news, and Charlotte was surprised to hear that only the blackout was reported. Back at Tepe's mansion, Yu and her team of tech-savvy maids try to regain control of the Arima Hills building. Says it is not uncommon among maids to have lots of skills. After going haywire with her keyboard, she announces that they regained the CCTV footage of the building. Shortly after that, the assassins shut them out of the system again. Hearing this, Tepe decides he has to go to Arima Hills. However, the maids tell him it's a bad idea. However, when he insists, Yu says she'll provide him with all the support he needs. After this, Tepe decides to take the creepy bike, but gets interrupted by Sylvie, who says she's heard about the situation and would like to go too. On their way, they get attacked by some assailants, so Sylvie blocks the bullets with her sword. Just then, Yu asks Tep to press the blue button on the bike. When he did, the bike's creepy legs were launched as missiles that took the assailants out. Meanwhile, after Charlotte pesters her captors for information, the leader of the assassins reveals he's doing it because he thinks it's unfair that all fingers are not equal. When Tepe and Sylvia arrive at Arima Hills, they find the assassins on guard drinking, so they snuck in with Yu's help. After this, they take down some of the assassins, but get cornered eventually. Suddenly, a unit of Arima's security arrives to help. Just then, Seika distracts the media by setting up a mini concert. While Tepe and Sylvie wonder what's going on, Seika informs them that Yu filled her in on the situation. In Eshin's suite, Hartman taunts Josephine on her failing plan and tries to play hero, but gets shot in the process. Meanwhile, Charlotte tries to talk the assassin out of his warped thinking, but he responds and says they can never see things from the same perspective. Afterward, Yu and her team regain control of the Arima Hills building and shut in the assassins, while Sylvie jumps out of the helicopter and takes out the guards on the roof. Back at the suite, Vincent asks Josephine why they had to take out Hartman. In response, she introduced their group as Truth and said their goal was to ruin the Arima group's reputation. After declaring that they lost, Josephine orders her men to retreat. While the assassins retreat, one of them reveals to Charlotte that they planted a bomb in the building. Shortly after, Tepe and Sylvia reunite with Ishin and Vincent and are informed that Vincent is dead. Just then, Tepe runs off to find Charlotte. Afterward, Tepe finds Charlotte tied up and hugs her. A few moments later, Ishin thanks Seika for her contribution. In response, Seika says she only did it to save Tepe. Meanwhile, immediately Charlotte tells Tepe about the bomb. There is another power outage in the building. After this, Seika's helicopter takes off with the others aboard, while Yu informs them about the bombs. Ishin then points out that Tepe and Charlotte are still in the building. Yu then says they've lost control of the surveillance of the building and could only contact Tepe via radio. She also adds that they've discovered 5 bombs so far. Seika suddenly begins to panic, but Sylvia calms her down. Meanwhile, while Tepe couldn't find a way out of the building, Charlotte was happy to be holding hands with her crush. When he reminds her that they are about to be blown into a million pieces, Charlotte says she knows he'll figure it out. Just then, Josephine speaks to them through the radio systems and asks if they're enjoying their date. In response, Tepe asks why she wants them dead, and she says it's because they're rich. After this, the helicopter arrives at Tepe's mansion, and there Yu announces that they can clear out the virus in their systems. However, Arima's data will be lost with it. Ishin then asks them to go ahead since he and his employee have the data stored in their minds. Just then, they get a call from the security guys who then say they've found the bombs. After this, they devise a plan to defuse the bombs, and Sylvia volunteers to go rescue Tepe and Charlotte. Vincent tries to stop her, but she says she has to get her fiancé and best friend out of trouble. Not wanting to be left out, Seika offers to go with her. After this, Yu announces that Teppei is the closest to the last bomb and will have to defuse it, so Teppei agrees. After this, Yu commences the formatting of the servers while Sylvie and Seika take off. Back at Arima Hills, Teppei and Charlotte run into some of her captors who got left behind, but the idiots keep talking about their lame fantasies. Teppei suddenly knocks them out and they make their way towards the bomb. However, they have a locked door and Yu says they'll have to break it down somehow. During the flight, Seika reminds Sylvia of their pact and asks why she's laying claims to Teppei. Sylvia responds and says she's unsure of how she feels about him. After a while, they both admit that they were in love with Teppei, but Sylvia says she admires Seika for being able to talk about her feelings. Meanwhile, while Teppei tries to force the door open, Charlotte finds a chainsaw in a store nearby, so they break through the door. Back in Teppei's mansion, Ishin and Vincent decide to inform the king of Hazelrink about Hartman's death. Afterwards, the formatting was completed and Yu's team regained control of Arima Hills. Just then, Yu directs Teppei and Charlotte towards the bomb, but they get shot at by one of the assassins. While Sylvie and Seika search the building, they find one of the bombs and Yu guides them on how to defuse it while Seika freaks out. Meanwhile, asks the assassin why he didn't escape with his comrades. The assassin then says he really needs to take Teppei down because he's just a lucky bastard who became an heir to the conglomerate overnight. After this, Teppei goes for his wooden sword and asks Charlotte to take cover. After this, the assassin shoots at Teppei, but he is Captain America for a few seconds, and then he knocks out the assassin while Charlotte watches amazed. Somewhere else in the building, Seika says they're running out of time and throws the bomb. Sylvie then suddenly swings her sword and cuts one of the wires. After this, the bomb timer stops, so Seika calms down. Meanwhile, Teppei couldn't figure out which wire to cut, so he dumped the bomb in a dust chute nearby, and it went off. Afterward, Ishin thanks Yu and her team members for saving the day. Back in Arima Hills, Teppei and his friends reunite, so Sylvie informs Charlotte that Hartman was shot while trying to save Ishin and Vincent. Hearing this, Charlotte says she never really loved Hartman before, but has finally fallen in love with him because of his heroic action. Just then, Hartman arrives, disguised as a driver to pick Charlotte up. When she asks about Alfred, Hartman says he's home, worried sick about her. So Charlotte says goodbye to her friends and leaves. Shortly after this, a car arrives and Yu jumps out of it to hug Teppei. Pissed by this, Seika asks if she plans to squeeze life out of him. Silva then hugs Vincent, while Ishin thanks them all for their collective effort. After this, Ishin reveals that Alfred is on his way to pick up Charlotte and asks about her whereabouts. Teppei then responds saying she was just picked up by a driver who claims to have been sent by Alfred. Ishin then says he only contacted Alfred, surprising them all. Meanwhile, on their way, Hartman suddenly stops the car and Josephine steps in the car and puts Charlotte to sleep. The next day, Charlotte's friends feel sad because she's missing. After this, it was discovered from a CCTV footage from an airport that Hartman staged the whole event and abducted Charlotte. Vincent then tells Teppei not to do anything stupid since it's an international problem now and he knows how he feels about her. The next day at school, while Teppei broods about his missing friend, Nezu asks if he'd like to talk to him about it. Teppei then leaves the classroom and goes on a bike ride, while thinking about the moments he shared with Charlotte. Just then, he realizes Cupid has done a number on him. Meanwhile, Charlotte awakes on a train in Hazelrink and tells Hartman that he must have 9 lives. In response, Hartman says she looks good as always. He then reveals his plan to crush Teppei and disgrace the Arima group before the whole world. After this, Charlotte asks why he wants to do that, and Hartman says it simply because Teppei was made successor. While leaving, Hartman asks his guards to watch Charlotte. Coincidentally, they were the same guys from before, so she begs them to let her loose and they oblige. Back at Teppei's mansion, Yu tells Sylvia that they got a piece of information that Charlotte is being held hostage on a train. Sylvia then asks if the information is from a reliable source. Yu then says that's the only information they have and she isn't sure it's true. Later that day, Teppei arrives and is intercepted by Seika, who then asks why he's slowly losing his sanity. She then asks if he has figured out a way to rescue Charlotte. In response, Teppei says it is impossible since she's headed toward Hazelrink. Hearing this, Seika then reminds him of his dedicated spirit during his preparation to join the club. However, Teppei says rescuing someone is totally different from learning to dance. Just then, Seika gives him a spirit-lifting kiss and says he's still the guy she fell in love with. While Tepe looks surprised, Sylvie walks in on them and gives Tepe a rude awakening, calling him pathetic for giving up too soon. She then says she's going to save Charlotte since she is on her way to Russia, but will stop briefly at Hazelring. Later, in Tepe's bedroom, Yu joins him on his bed and cools down his overheating brain. Just then, she tells him not to be too hard on himself, since everyone feels the same way he feels. In response, Tepe thanks Yu for being so nice, unlike Sylvie and Seika. After this, he tells Yu to tell him all she knows about Charlotte's location. Meanwhile, on the train, Josephine entertains herself while Hartman watches. After this, she says it's a bad idea to keep Charlotte on the train since they don't need her anymore. However, Hartman thinks otherwise. Josephine then asks if Hartman still wants to marry Charlotte. However, he ignores her question and leaves. Somewhere else on the train, Charlotte learned from the guards that the train was headed for Russia. So she says she needs to take a bath since Russia is a long way off. Back in Japan, Vincent tells Sylvie to stay back in Japan with Tepe, but she responds by saying Tepe will eventually come around and go with her to rescue Charlotte. Despite Vincent's efforts to convince her, Sylvie refuses to back down. On the train, while Charlotte takes her bath, the guards try to check out her bouncy castles but get sent back. Just then, Josephine comes in to fondle her melons and intimidate her. However, Charlotte refuses to be intimidated. After this, Hartman asks Josephine if she's sure she sent the information about the train. In response, Josephine says they might not trust the source of the information. Hartman then says he can't wait for Tepe to take the bait. After thinking about it for a while, Tepe decides to go rescue Charlotte. Sometime later, Tepe tells Ishin about his plans to go rescue Charlotte. In response, Ishin says he had seen that coming since he's quite similar to his mother. Hearing this, Tepe says his mother fell for his father because Ishin and his father share some similarities. Ishin laughs at the joke and gives Tepe some money. Surprised, Tepe says it's his first time seeing so much money. Ishin then gives Tepe a lecture on how not to destroy himself in the pursuit of wealth. After this, he also gave him a sword made by Orima Industries and said that it could cut through steel. He then says whatever Tepe does with that sword will largely impact the lives of his employees. After Tepe bows and takes his leave, Ishin reads Yu's expression and asks if she's unhappy that Tepe is risking his life to save Charlotte. Without waiting for a response, Ishin reveals she's aware of the competition going on for Tepe's heart and advises her not to give up too soon. Yu responds and says she's just a maid. Ishin then tells her she is as good as a daughter to him. Meanwhile, while Tepe prepares to board his plane, Neza resumes his chatterbox duties but gets dragged away by the ladies. Just then, Tepe asks Seiko why she is so quiet, since she wields her words like a merciless blade. Surprised, Seika then calls him a fool for trying to fly across the ocean to save some girl. After this, she asks if Tepe would come to save her if she gets abducted. Without waiting for a response, she hugs Tepe and tells him never to return because she hates him. When Tepe takes his leave, he pauses and says he'd come to get her if she were abducted. Later, Yu gives a status report on a group call with Vincent and Alfred. She then requests their help for the rescue mission. Shortly after, Tepe arrives at his destination and is welcomed by Sylvie, who tells him he's late. While they talk, Sylvie is addressed as Captain, surprising Tepe. Just then, Maria shows up and reveals that Sylvie defeated the previous captain. After this, Vincent shows up and invites Tepe and Yu to a welcome party. At the party, Tepe approaches Sylvie and says it feels weird to be partying with everything that's happened. In response, Sylvie says Vincent likes partying, especially in times like that. Tepe then reminds her that they met at a party where she was practicing alone. Hearing this, Sylvie suggests that they spar. While they spar, they talk about their countries and Sylvie says she's made up her mind to serve and fight for her country. After this, Tepe loses to Sylvie and she suggests that they call off their engagement since she can't get married to a weak loser like him. After this, she kisses Tepe and they decide to rescue Charlotte. The next morning, in a meeting, Yu reveals that the train is coming their way and will soon arrive. They then agree to save Charlotte in the little time window they've got. Meanwhile, on the train, Charlotte plays games with the guards, giving them nosebleeds with her jokes and charms. When the train crosses the border, Sylvie orders the train to stop, but Hartman tells his men to ignore her. So Sylvie pursues the train with her cavalry unit. Alfred, disguised as Tepe, also rode his bike alongside the train. When Hartman was notified of his presence, he asked his men to speed up the train. After this, Hartman's soldiers opened fire on Alfred. In retaliation, Sylvie commands the artillery unit to fire on the train. Just then, Alfred channeled his inner Batman and took out the guards on the train. As the train approaches Tepe's position, he hops in the train and takes out the driver. Just then, Hartman orders Josephine to retake the control room and asks his guards to take out Sylvie and her cavalry unit. Shortly after this, Josephine takes Charlotte hostage and uses her as leverage to stop Tepe. After this, Josephine tries to take out Charlotte but gets shot by Hartman, who says that's what she gets for trying to ruin the plan. After this, Hartman says he vowed to humiliate the Arima group because Aishin once humiliated him for being a pickpocket. After this, he attacks the guards, but Charlotte almost falls from the train in the process, so he saves her. However, Hartman shoots him off the train and saves Charlotte. Back in Japan, Seika's friends worry about her as she's been spending more time on the roof. Suddenly, Nessa joins the conversation and blabs about the rescue mission. However, he suddenly gets in a wall again. Just then, half the school arrives at the club room claiming to know about the mission. While the girls prepare to crucify him, the other students reveal that they gave him no choice since Seika was acting weirdly and they needed answers. While Seika broods on the school roof, regretting her choice to stay back, Hartman tells Charlotte that he has no choice. After this, he cuts her ropes loose and says he had to do it for their country. Just then, he adds that he can make people believe that Tepe kidnapped her. In response, Charlotte says no one would believe him. However, Hartman says people believe only what they want. Afterward, Charlotte asks Hartman to treat Josephine, but he says she can do it herself. Charlotte then picks Josephine up. Meanwhile, Tepe wakes up on a bike, riding with Sylvie and Alfred. Surprised by this, he says he thought he was on his way to hell. Alfred then calls him a sissy for passing out from a bullet graze. Sylvie then asks Alfred to move faster, but he says the bike can only go so fast with 3 people on it. So they pause to play rock, paper, scissors. After this, Tepe and Sylvie are on the bike, leaving Alfred to cry out his eyes. On the train, while Charlotte tries to treat Josephine, she gets approached by her guards, who then offer to help her and reveal they both went to medical school. While they picked Josephine up, Charlotte asked why they dropped out, and they both said they ran out of money, so they got hired as assassins through the internet. Moved by this, Charlotte thanks them for helping. Just then, Tepe catches up with the train and draws attention from Charlotte and Hartman. Suddenly, the guards open fire on them, but Tepe manages to get on the train. After this, he tells Sylvie to stand for his return. Meanwhile, Charlotte manages to get away from Hartman while he goes after her on the train. Eventually, Hartman catches up with Charlotte, but so does Tepe. Pointing his gun at Tepe, Hartman asks Tepe why he's not dead. In response, Tepe says he got lucky. Hartman then says he won't be so lucky this time. While Charlotte panics, Tepe reassures her that he's going to save her. Just then, Hartman fired some shots but missed. Tepe then tries to talk Hartman out of his madness. However, he suddenly blows up the train control room. After this, Hartman confesses that he is responsible for the death of Tepe's parents. However, Tepe says his parents live on in his heart and forgive Hartman. Pissed off by this, Hartman tries to shoot, but Tepe disarms him but lets him live. Suddenly, the train blows up, but Tepe and Charlotte are flung into the air. Luckily, Sylvie arrives just in time to catch them. Afterward, Charlotte celebrates her freedom while Sylvie cringes. The next day, Seika announces to the social club members that her friends are safe. Afterward, the social club throws a party to welcome them back to school, and Tepe gets to dance with each of his girls. Which of Tepe's baddies do you think is the prettiest? Leave your answer in the comments, and if you like anime recaps like this, watch this video over here.